Wake the up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Cyberpunk 2077's launch week is upon us, and it has really been very controversial because all the reviews have been done based on PC versions of the game, where most people haven't actually played the console versions. They're taking down footage of people posting on YouTube because they don't want people to spoil it, so they say. But the game has been mired in a lot of controversy throughout its development. So what we're going to do in this video is just break it down, do a timeline of all the controversial things they've been doing, and I'm mainly going to highlight how they've been using trans people or trans issues to either purposely cater to an edgier, more, I guess, bigoted section of the gamer fan base, and people who love these edgelord jokes, love Elon Musk, think, you know, did you just assume my gender is a funny joke? I'm going to identify as an attack helicopter is a funny joke. And we're also going to be talking about the crunch conditions and how a game about cyberpunk is seemingly very dystopian in its development. Now, before we get any further, if you want to support my work, please like the video, maybe share, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you want to support it monetarily, please look at my Patreon down in the description. Nearly everything I make is demonetized, including this video, so any financial support is appreciated. So before we go any further, I guess I should make my relationship and how I feel about CD Projekt Red clear. I didn't really know who they were before The Witcher 3, but after getting that game on release day in 2015, I completed it quickly. I've never been so obsessed with a game. I do regular 6-hour gaming sessions all night because I was at university, and I went on to complete it 3 times on the PS4, and I'm also nearly done with it again on the Nintendo Switch. I love this game. It's the closest I've ever felt to basically playing a video game which is like a fantasy book. It's so rich in its storytelling and world. The characters are so well written, and I immediately felt so attached to all of them despite never reading Witcher books, never, you know, watching even Let's Plays of the previous games, and never playing them, of course. And CD Projekt Red got this image for itself as a good company because when you would get the Witcher physical edition, you'd get a map, you'd get like a lore book, you get all this extra stuff, some stickers. And full disclosure, I have pre-ordered Cyberpunk and I'm really looking forward to it. And I ordered the physical edition just in case they put some stuff in there as well, because they're like an old school company. You can even see this in the way they approach Witcher DLC, because Blood and Wine and Hearts of Stone, very, very reasonably priced, but so much hours of content, especially Blood and Wine. It could be a new game if this was a different franchise. So I appreciate all that stuff there. And this company have made my favourite game of all time, but seeing the fanaticism of fans around Cyberpunk has been really concerning, especially when I've made so many videos really delving into the toxic parts of the online gaming community. And honestly, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed by this game. This isn't Grand Theft Auto 2077. This is an RPG based on a tabletop RPG made by people who made a massive RPG. But when I go on social media and see the fanaticism, it feels like it's a lot bigger than Witcher 3, which is pretty crazy considering this is a new franchise in video games. So maybe their edgier marketing has worked out in getting a lot of new fans who do maybe think this is another GTA rather than an extension of the company's previous work. Most of this video is going to be focused on trans issues and, I guess, toxic gaming culture. So we're not going to start with CD Projekt Red, but we're going to start with GOG, which CD Projekt Red owns, and we're going to talk about their Twitter account and the social media post written by a guy who was a Gamergator. So I missed this story, but it's pretty problematic how long GOG and CD Projekt Red kept this guy on. So the original story about, a year or so ago, on the 22nd of October, Polish game seller GOG, a part of CD Projekt Red, found itself in trouble again on Twitter. It had insensitively appropriated the trans civil rights hashtag won't be erased, writing, "Classic PC games won't be erased on our watch," it tweeted. "Yeah, how's that for some use of hashtags?" The account quickly deleted the tweet, but not before the internet noticed and a stink was kicked up. Not only was it a problem on its own, but it was the third problematic tweet in a handful of months from inside CD Projekt Red. As I want to point out, the article says once is a mistake, but 3 times. So a day after this, they posted an apology saying, "Yesterday we posted a tweet containing a trending hashtag as a pun. The tweet was neither intended as a malicious attack, nor as a comment to the ongoing social debate. GOG should focus only on games. We acknowledge that and commit to it. Now, the guy who ran the social media account for GOG was called Sean Halliday. He actually wrote an apology, which he was going to tweet out, but he didn't get to because he was promptly fired after this final, I guess, gaffe. So it's funny, in the article he says that he's not a political person, and he goes on to say, that's one of the reasons I actually left the UK, to get away from the whole Brexit thing, especially in the northeast. And on the GOG forums he booted out all the super right-wing and super left-wing people, and the company was happy with his results. But he tweeted something about Postal 2, where there is a urine stream going on games journalism, and the date ends on August 28th, 2014. It says games journalism committed suicide, and this is referencing Gamergate. So Halliday even acknowledged seeing this to the reporter here, but he said it didn't give him cause for concern because he didn't know what Gamergate was. And the article says that they didn't believe him because a community manager in 2018 would have known this, but upon further research, the author writes, I even found an E3 2015 article written by Halliday about Anita Sarkeesian and Jonathan McIntosh, two critics repeatedly attacked by Gamergate, and in the article Halliday seemed to be doing a similar thing. He wrote lines like, both McIntosh and Sarkeesian had been suspected of telling lies when it comes to their connection with video games, and they are not people who enjoy games, they are people who enjoy power and accolades, even if that means stumping on the hopes of a movement while dehumanising anyone who dares questioning them. Again, this guy pretended he didn't know what Gamergate was. It's pretty clear he was a Gamergater, and CD Projekt Red signed off on his tweet. He didn't just tweet it like in a rogue way. When the reporter pressed him about his Gamergater article, he said, I'm certainly of the view there's a discussion to be had about the video game press and industry, but I disagree with how most of the Gamergate crowd handled it. But I can say the same about the very liberal side of the culture too. I don't really subscribe to any group. I find the whole concept to be a little toxic in general. I'm a huge believer in just talking to someone and talking to people, understanding them, but some you simply cannot do that with. So it pretty much seems like he's not very apologetic, even though he lied about being a Gamergater. It's pretty clear he probably still is one as well. So that company is a part of CD Projekt Red. And I use that example just to show the culture where they will approve tweets making fun of transgender people or adopting the hashtag to make some weird posts about video games, and also their general Gamergater right-wing sort of bias they have in certain regards. So let's go on to the Cyberpunk Twitter account itself. So they replied to a tweet in August 2018, and the original tweet was them saying, Gamescom starts as E3 ended, check in Twitter. Someone quote tweets it, I want more guys. And Cyberpunk 2077 said, did you just assume their gender? It's a popular, unfunny joke that is pretty well known about trans people. You know, if you can identify as X gender, why can't you identify as anything else is another popular joke. So did you just assume my gender became a punchline of a not that very funny joke by conservatives, and they tweeted in response after they got, you know, pretty well-deserved backlash. Sorry to all those offended by one of the responses sent out from our account earlier. Harming anyone was never our intention. Again, total non-apology. Just like with Halliday's non-apology, just like with these guys, sorry to everyone who was offended. It's on you for being offended. Not that this joke was in poor taste, and people are right to have problems with a company like this, tweeting something like that. Sorry you are offended, you're just a baby, SJW. But we won't tweet that again. Now, with these two things in mind, and CD Projekt Red's, I guess, lack of sensitivity on trans issues, of course they got a lot of criticism when art appeared from the game, which was an advertisement where there was a transgender person with a pretty explicit penis bulging out of their pants. So a Polygon article, Cyberpunk 2077 art criticised as transphobic is meant to reflect corporate exploitation, says the artist. So Kasia Radziak told Polygon at E3 this week that her intent was in fact to reflect the dystopian state of the world in the grip of omnipresent, all-powerful corporations. Personally, for me, this looks sexy. I like how this person looks, she said. This model is used, their beautiful body is used for corporate reasons. They are displayed, they are just as a thing, and that's a terrible part of it. The corporations create those very aggressive advertisements that use and abuse a lot of people's needs and instincts. So hypersexualization is apparent everywhere, and in our ads, there are many examples of hypersexualized women, hypersexualized men, and hypersexualized people in between. It was a conscious choice on our end to show that in this world, a world where you are a cyberpunk, a person fighting against corporations, that is what you're fighting against. Now, on the surface, taken in isolation, that point can be fair enough. We see that in our own society, mainly with women, but also with men to a lesser extent. So maybe in the future, as transgender people become more accepted by the general public and it becomes more normalized and there isn't as much as a backlash, maybe corporations will also start doing stuff like this. Again, you don't really see a bulging phallus when you're advertising men like this explicitly, but fair enough if that's the point they want to make. But let's take this in a broader context. If you've just seen what I've read, the 2 really insensitive tweets about trans issues, do you trust CD Projekt Red to get this right? Now, before we get any further, the gaming community at large thought everyone was being crybaby SJWs about this post as well. Here is Angry Joe from when this issue arose, and here's what he said about it.
Targeting, you see how transparent their bullshit is and how they are either virtue signaling or completely ignorant or reaching for reasons. And then there's also the transphobic thing, where it's one of the pictures has a trans person and there's a big fucking dick. There's a big old fat, huge dick, right? And the person, and I read, the artist has a lot of artwork, and this artist loves the body. Doesn't matter if it's male, female, trans, but you do put that out there in some way, and then somebody thinks it's offensive on behalf of somebody else. Well, from my perspective, social justice is not a negative thing. It wasn't a negative thing until it's being co-opted by vapid morons who fucking, complain about every little goddamn letter in the fucking word in order to take that T is offensive.
So that segment is from a video that I made about the toxic politics of the gaming community, so go check that out if you're interested. But yeah, basically saying virtue signalers, they want to make an issue out of everything. Now, the game has now been out to reviewers, and Polygon's reviewer for the game, Carolyn Petit, is transgender, so I thought it would be helpful to look at the article they wrote and how they feel about the representation. Does the message from the artist translate to the game? Is this sensitively done in showing this dystopia? So Caroline writes, thankfully your character's gender is not tied to your choice of genitals. You can create a dude with a vagina or a lady with a penis, that's no problem. But because of everything else about how the game handles trans identity, this hardly feels like the progressive step it should be. Rather than just letting you pick your pronouns independently of all your other characters' creation choices, your pronouns are assigned based on your selection of voice. Pick the feminine voice and your pronouns are she, her, and vice versa. There are no non-binary pronoun options, putting it behind Call of Duty in that regard. As a trans woman with a voice that many would not describe as feminine, this is direct linking of gender identity to having a voice that sounds masculine or feminine, feels weirdly essentializing. I could have forgiven it if the rest of the game took strides to humanize trans identities, but it sure doesn't. Ubiquitous throughout Night City are ads for a beverage called Kavernacle, which is the ad I showed, that feature a female-coded model with a penis visible through her skin-tight clothing, making it clear that in Cyberpunk, trans bodies are objectified and commodified. Some cis bodies are too, of course, but the crucial difference is that as V, we constantly meet, interact, and form relationships with cis characters who have far more dimensional than the surface of any sexualized imagery on a billboard. The same can't be said of trans characters. I did spot a trans flag on one character's vehicle, but that hardly counts as positive trans representation. It doesn't even necessarily mean the character is trans. And I really like this point Caroline makes at the end. For elements like the inescapable dehumanization of trans people on imagery throughout the city to function as any kind of critique of transphobia, the game itself would need to create tension around those images by showing us humanized trans people navigating the world, but it doesn't. The result is a game in which transphobic players can just laugh at us by using the character creator to generate models they consider worthy of mockery and derision, and by gagging at the Kavernacle ads they see everywhere, or fetishize the ads as objects of desire. Now, I feel that's a really well-written piece, and through Caroline's experience of the game, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if there are trans characters who are very visible in the game. It is, of course, a massive game. Perhaps Caroline missed them, but it's clear there aren't any in the main storyline because as a reviewer, Caroline would have played through this. And it's true, you saw that Angry Joe clip where he talks about, this advertisement, this woman having a big dick. you talk about, he's laughing about that, he finds it funny. And you can already see those videos of, gamer bros and anti-SJW types just making a character with a massive penis or anything like that to laugh at. And it's a really good point that if you are using trans people as these dystopian advertisements for products, if you don't have normal trans people in the game, if you don't have trans people who aren't objectified, then the dystopian element kind of goes out the window a bit, because it just seems like, some sort of smutty thing that they put in for a good laugh. So you'll look at that and be like, haha, I've never seen that in another video game. But you won't actually think about anything to do with trans issues. And when you combine that all with their insensitivity with their tweets, it really seems like a company that don't really care about these issues. Compare that, to example, with Naughty Dog. So they have a trans character in The Last of Us Part 2 called Lev. And if you listen to the Last of Us Part 2 podcast, the person who plays Lev is trans. Neil Druckmann says they had a lot of conversations internally with trans workers at Naughty Dog to get this representation right. I'm not the person who will criticise the nuances of that performance and that depiction of a trans character. But in my opinion, especially compared to CD Projekt Red, that's a much better way to do it, where you're in consultation with trans employees and you actually get a trans person to play this character who's a central part of the storyline. In my mind, that is better representation done with sensitivity in mind. You could make the argument, because I think Hallie Gross and Neil Druckmann aren't trans themselves as writers, maybe there is room for development there where you'd want a trans person maybe collaborating on this portion of the game to get it right, but overall it seems a lot better than the CD Projekt Red. So I really like this tweet from That's Right at Like Clockwork saying, Cyberpunk 2077 is wild to me because they use a trans woman body to generate the controversy to bring attention to their game, and then defended it by saying that corporations in Cyberpunk co-opt gender non-conformity to sell products. Literally the thing CDPR did. And that's a great point, combined with people who will mock this and find it funny, created a firestorm where the edgiest side of the gaming community, the fanatics who support this game before it's even come out, will back them. People like Angry Joe, you're just crybabies for whinging about this. CD Projekt Red are a beacon of good gaming and ethical gaming. You just want something to be mad about. Again, I like the point that they use this dystopian advertising to actually advertise their game to a specific segment of their fan base. So speaking of dystopian, speaking of CD Projekt Red allegedly being a great company to work for, speaking of, late stage capitalism, which goes hand in hand with dystopia, let's talk about the crunch to make this game, because it sounds completely insane. And it probably hasn't ended, because from all accounts in the reviews, this game is broken and is filled with bugs. So back in September, Jason Schreier, who's of course very prominent video game journalist, probably the most prominent, wrote an article for Bloomberg titled Cyberpunk 2077 Publisher Orders 6-day weeks ahead of launch. So Polish video game developer CD Projekt Red told employees on Monday that 6-day work weeks will be mandatory leading up to the November release of the highly anticipated Cyberpunk 2077, reneging on an earlier promise to not force overtime on the project. So one of the heads at the company said, starting today, the entire development studio is in overdrive, your typical amount of work, and 1 day of the weekend. And then the article said the extra work would be paid as required by Polish labour laws. Many other video game studios don't pay for overtime. I take it upon myself to receive the full backlash for the decision. I know this is in direct opposition to what we've said about crunch. It's also in direct opposition to what I personally grew to believe a while back, that crunch should never be the answer, but we've extended all possible means of navigating the situation. Now, this statement was actually before the game was delayed from November 19th to this Thursday, but it shows further problems in the company that they feel there's no other way to do this. Of course, they have shareholders, deadlines and everything like that, but wouldn't the ethical way to do this all would be delaying the game by another couple of months, delaying it by a year? It's clearly broken anyway, and it's clearly going to make a ton of money. You have Keanu Reeves as one of the main characters. Delay it and treat your employees better, because anyone who's worked any type of job, the weekend is already so short. Imagine working 6 days a week in crunch conditions. That's not a normal workday either. Imagine your mental health, the time you'd be away from your families. You are doing all this hard work to make this company a ton of money. But it doesn't stop there. An anonymous CD Projekt Red took to Reddit to post that they'd actually been in crunch for a lot longer than just from September to December, like this article was saying. So the post says, "Hi, CDP developer here. This is just the last thing in a long list of very toxic behaviour from the upper management towards us developers. First of all, I can confirm this conversation never happened. If anything, the developers have been crunching non-stop since May 2019, where the management was like, oh shit, we need to make the game, we must hurry. Mind that we were barely out of alpha at that point, and even the most developed pointed out that it was impossible to do the whole game almost from scratch in 1 year. If anything, people have been dreading the inevitable 2-year death mark since long before the crunch started, because they know it's just how CDP rolls. Dick around and pre-prod for ages and then rush everyone and work devs to the bone to make up for time lost. And none of them was looking forward to it. We asked, what's the plan if we can't deliver it in the set deadline? And up until December, the answer from management was, we have to, there's no plan B. And to give a picture of how low is the level of communication between the management and developers, we found out both times on Twitter and other socials that the game was being delayed, with a mail from Adam following a few hours later. Same happened with the gold release and any other announcement since June 2019. Many people have been spending the weekends in the office and doing 16 hours per day pretty much since June 2019, some departments even far as a year earlier. Every time this was addressed, you get the usual copy-paste spiel about we're fueled by passion, we are rebels, this is not for everyone, and other such copy-paste slogans, which was a cool way to say we have no idea what we're doing, but we have infinite cash and we fix everything with more crunch. And probably this is what makes it preposterous. No one in the studio benefits or cares to release earlier. Many people just want to do their jobs, get paid, and possibly not have to sleep in the studio, which happened, and not scarcely, especially in Warsaw. The people that want the product out ASAP are the board and the marketing directors, and they don't give a flying fuck about work balance. So crunch is obviously a blight on the video game industry, and there was recently an article by Jason Schreier on Bloomberg as well, where he talked about Hades, a real hidden gem along with Celeste, talked about how the game's developers really try and mitigate crunch, where, for example, you can't send emails to people after 5 PM, because even if you're excited about this, you're passionate about this, like CD Projekt Red are saying everyone's passionate about their product, you can't rope people into working after the work hours are done. And they're saying people have to take a minimum of 20 days holiday. Seems like a very ethical way to do things. I'm still waiting for probably like a scandal to come out of that studio, but on the surface, sounds pretty good. But CD Projekt Red sound like one of the worst offenders here. You have Rockstar being, in my opinion, the worst because of the management there being insane bullies. Then you have Naughty Dog, who are pretty bad as well. And then you have these guys. You know, the stuff that he mentioned in the article, it is completely insane that some people have been crunching for 2 years, 16-hour days, in the office, working weekends. All while making a game about dystopias, all while publishing these adverts which they say are dystopian. All while maintaining this game is influenced by Philip K. Dick and Blade Runner and everything like that. While at the same time, to make this product, you're grossly exploiting people. Your overtime might be paid, but it's not a choice for people. And then of course you have a lot of people who are contractors as well, so you have no job security, and you have the management who don't care. They made The Witcher 3, that game sold insanely well. Most people love it, including me. I said it's one of the best games I've ever played. So they think they can keep doing this to make these products. But at the end of the day, they're just grossly exploiting passionate, talented people to make as much money as possible, coupled together with the awful insensitivity towards trans issues and actually using trans people to stir up outrage and help market their game while not actually giving them proper representation in the game, really shows you that while they tried to make a dystopian game, they ended up using dystopian practices and late-stage capitalist practices to make this game, which at the end of the day is a product to make the management and the board of directors at CD Projekt Red as much money as possible. And like they said, they have about infinite cash to make this game. They have infinite resources, but you don't have infinite time. So what do you do with that time? You just make your employees crunch. So I have been hyped for this game. You see on my posters on my wall, I love Blade Runner, I love dystopian fiction, I love all this stuff. And I am curious to check out the game for myself. I'm curious to see how they handle a lot of stuff. I'm curious to see the politics of the game. But what I am, assured of is that the company here is trash. Like many corporations in the world, that they're just as bad. And just because they don't do microtransactions, just because the DLC is substantial, just because The Witcher was an excellent game with good gaming practices, doesn't mean you can't criticize the company, doesn't mean people are wrong to criticize them. And when they've done all this and the game still releases in a buggy mess, you know these employees are going to suffer even more making patches, making new content, so it never ends. And people in the games industry need to unionize quickly to help change the companies they work for the better, because you can't rely on hidden gem companies like Hades management taking these steps for you. You need to unionize together to get better rights for yourself. Anyway, that is it for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Please like the video, maybe share, also subscribe. Check out my Patreon in the description if you want to follow me on social medias at the Kavernacle, mainly on Twitter and Instagram. Check out my subreddit r/theCavernacle. Check out my personal Reddit as well. Also come join my Discord, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.